So, welcome to Get the Dish. We are excited that you are joining us today. Our topic is going to be Dutch oven cooking. My name is Amy Robertson. I am an extension educator here with the University of Idaho. I am located in the northernmost county up by the Canadian border. And I have Joey Pites helping me out today as my chat helper and assistant. She's also from the University of Idaho. She's at almost the opposite end of the state, down in the southern part. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of some of the topics we're going to be covering today. We're going to do a little bit of an introduction. We're going to talk about the types of Dutch ovens, some of those accessories, different types of cooking methods, some guidelines for temperatures, care and storage safety, and then a demonstration. And then definitely some time for questions and answers. But before we jump into this, Joey's going to launch a quick poll. So we're hoping that all of you joining us are able to answer. There's 4 short questions. If you're joining via computer or tablet, you should be able to answer. If you're joining via phone, sometimes that's a little harder to do. But the first question we're asking is this your first time participating in an extension class, workshop, or event? And then, is this your first time participating in our Get the Dish series? This is our 2nd year of this program. And then, what is your experience level with Dutch oven cooking? This helps me to kind of gauge our audience and know who's joining. And then also, how many individuals are joining with you? Is it just you yourself? Do you maybe have a friend or someone else, a colleague, someone joining with you? So we'll give it about 5 more seconds. It looks like about everybody has answered. All right, well, thank you so much for answering that poll. All right. It looks like we've got a wide range of people in our audience that have varying knowledge when it comes to Dutch oven cooking. So a little bit on the history. So Dutch ovens have been around for quite a while. So in 1707, Abraham Darby patented his design for a cast iron cooking pot. So before that, we were using brass mostly for a lot of our cooking pots. Unfortunately, that was a little bit expensive for some people, so he wanted to look for something that was more affordable, and iron was a cheaper metal for him to work with. So after, doing some research, looking at what different people were doing, he was able to create this cast iron cooking pot, and then he called it the Dutch oven. So Dutch ovens have been used by a wide variety of people. It was very common with mountain men, pioneers coming across the West, explorers, trappers, cowboys, and then even today, campers, hunters, a lot of people still use it. And at that beginning, it was just the basic flat pot with a fairly simple lid. And then Paul Revere is who added the legs and then the type of lid we have with that lip. When the Dutch oven became in common use in the American colonies. And then Lewis and Clark even carried a Dutch oven with them on their westward trek in 1804. So Dutch ovens do have a very rich history. So what is a Dutch oven? I know sometimes we think of that picture there on the top, sometimes we think of the picture on the bottom, and yes, they are both Dutch ovens. So there's 2 basic definitions of a Dutch oven. So it's a heavy pot of enameled cast iron that has that tight-fitting lid and the 2 handles. You can use it on your stovetop or in your oven. So that is your Dutch oven for home use. However, today we're going to focus on the one on the bottom. So it's a cast iron kettle that does again have that tight cover, that lid that seals it good, but it has short legs and then a different type of handle because you're going to use it by cooking either over a flame or by heating with coals. And sometimes people call these Dutch ovens camp stove Dutch ovens. So if I sometimes refer to it as a stove, that is the type of Dutch oven I am talking about. So when you are getting ready to do your Dutch oven cooking, there are some definite accessories that are really helpful to have. And most of these are probably things you already have at home. If it's something you don't have and you're really wanting to get into outdoor Dutch oven cooking, then a couple of these are very necessary and some items you're going to want to look into purchasing. So you definitely need those leather gloves or oven mitts because you are cooking outside and you've got that hot pot. There's going to be a lot of things you're touching that are very warm. So to protect your hands, you want to have that. A charcoal chimney is really important because you want to be able to start those charcoal briquettes successfully. And later on, we'll see how to do that. And then a charcoal bucket. So if you have just an old metal bucket of some kind so that you can pour those briquettes in at the end so that they can cool down completely before disposal. Also, you want to have some sand in the bottom of your bucket to help insulate that as it cools down and not get too hot. A cooking stand. So you can see here in this top photo, there's kind of a table cooking stand type thing. It's got a windscreen, so you can purchase these, you can make these, but while that is something nice, you don't have to have that. You can cook on gravel, or you can, use some cinder blocks or something to cook on. So it doesn't have to be a table like this or a cooking stand. That is an option, but you don't have to have one to successfully use your Dutch oven. You do need a lid holder. So you can see that one here in the photo. This is just one you can purchase. The main thing is you want to have something that when you take your lid off of your Dutch oven, that you can set your lid on that, because if you set your lid straight on the ground, then you're going to be getting dirt and debris and other things on your lid and then putting that into your food. So while you can purchase items like this, you can also get your own, a thick cooking trivet, or I know some people that like to go to the solid waste department, and when there's old like gas stoves that are no longer in use, just getting those metal parts of the burner and using that as their lid holder is something that works really good. And then you do need a lid lifter. There's a lot of different designs. The one I have here is the one I'll be using later. But just as long as it's one that you can fit under that little handle on the top of the lid and successfully pull that lid off is all you need to do. So if you are purchasing one, you want to make sure that you're measuring that little part at the bottom to make sure that it does fit into that space at that top of the lid where you're going to be pulling that off. Because unfortunately, not all lid lifters are the same size as that little handle at the top of your lid. You definitely want some long-handled utensils. This just makes it easier for when you're stirring or doing whatever type of cooking you're doing in your Dutch oven. If you have really short utensils, your hand is going to get really hot while you're stirring, so those longer utensils are nice. Definitely metal is preferred. You don't want something plastic that's going to melt. Long-handled silicone would work as well. You need tongs. Tongs are really helpful for placing those briquettes on top of your Dutch oven when you're spreading them out underneath. Just make sure if you are using briquette tongs, that if you're using tongs for your food, that you're using two different pairs of tongs. You don't want to use the same tongs for both. And then having some high quality charcoal briquettes are really necessary to have successful cooking with your Dutch oven. So when you are looking at Dutch oven recipes, you'll probably notice that there is a size somewhere on that recipe. So Dutch ovens do come in a wide variety of sizes. And so this is a size chart from the Lodge brand of Dutch oven. That's just one of the brands you can find right now. Camp Chef is another brand. There's several brands out there, and the size and the capacity and weight is all pretty similar for modern Dutch ovens. If you're looking at older Dutch ovens, the size is going to be the same, but the weight is sometimes different. A lot of our older Dutch ovens actually weigh less than our current Dutch ovens. So when you are cooking, you do want to make sure that you're using the correct size. Most recipes are going to fit well in a 12-inch Dutch oven. The recipe we're using today is actually a 14, um, just because we're doing a little bit larger dish. But again, if you're cooking for a full family, then a 12-inch is going to be a pretty good size. If you're just cooking for yourself, one or two people, or it's a smaller dish, then an 8 or a 10 might work as well. But also some recipes can be adapted a little bit too if you need to adjust the size so that it fits well in your Dutch oven. So there are several different ways that you can use your Dutch oven when you are cooking. So I did want to include this photo here. You can see that someone just took their Dutch oven and they put it straight into their campfire. This is something you never want to do because when there's flames going, that fire can vary so much in temperature that it can actually get hot enough that it can destroy your Dutch oven. So while these can get very hot and be fine, definitely the fire, you can't control how hot it is, depending on what type of fuel you're using, the oxygen, all of those other components. We definitely would just never want to stick your Dutch oven straight into those flames and risk ruining, such a wonderful cooking piece, especially if it's an older Dutch oven that you found, because there is some really neat vintage Dutch ovens and cast iron out there that you can find. And as long as they still have that good seasoning on them, they can still be great pieces to use for your cooking. Um, but we don't want to ruin them by sticking them straight in that fire. So I am going to go over these different types of methods. So traditional, that's kind of what we're going to be doing the most today. There's stacking, cooking with a pan inside, tripod, propane stove. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use your Dutch oven. And one thing that's really nice is almost anything that you can do either on your stovetop or in your oven at home is something that you can do with a Dutch oven cook stove. So the type of cooking we're going to be doing today with our Dutch oven, it's using these hot coals or briquettes, both on top of the lid and underneath that Dutch oven. One thing that's really nice about this is that because you are picking the correct number of briquettes or coals to put on and around your Dutch oven, it really allows you to have some precise heat, and it's the easiest to control the temperature of your Dutch oven. So stacking is something else you can do. So here on the left is a stack that's obviously very high. As long as you have a flat, solid foundation or base that you are cooking on, then that is going to work very successfully. However, there are a few drawbacks when you are cooking in a stack like this, is that to rotate your pots or to check them, you have to move all of the pots above it to do so. So definitely, I would only want to be doing a large stack like this if my pots on the bottom have a fairly long cooking time, but still we're going to have to rotate them every 15 minutes. So when you are cooking with a Dutch oven, even when you're using those coals or briquettes, there can be hot spots. So every 15 minutes, you're going to want to rotate the bottom of your Dutch oven a quarter turn, and then you're going to rotate the lid another quarter turn in that same direction. And you do this every 15 minutes throughout the cooking process just to help regulate that heat and make sure you're not burning anything inside. So again, a stack that's more than 2 tall, you probably would want to do on the ground. I do have an example here. You can see on the right And this is a Dutch oven table that's super sturdy. It's very heavy. It's one that we use when I teach Dutch oven in person. It's actually a table my husband built for my mom. So my mom's name is Liz. And we can successfully cook, 5 or 6 pots in there because it is so sturdy. But we don't ever stack more than two tall just because of ease. Um, Also, when you are stacking pots, you want to make sure you're really paying attention to which recipe you put in each pot. If you can't remember, you want to make sure you write that down because you don't want to be lifting the lid to check too early because these are just like a regular stove that if you're lifting the lid, it's the same as when you're opening your oven. You're letting out a lot of heat and it can make your dishes take much longer to cook than you would like. So yeah, if you are doing multiple dishes, stacking is a great way to, kind of conserve some of that energy. You're not using as many briquettes. Just know there are a few drawbacks that come with that. So this is a fun thing you can do, is you can use it like you would your oven, and you can put pans in there to cook certain things. So maybe if you're making a pie, or I've made bundt cakes, or you can see in this photo, it's monkey bread. Um, Although there are a lot of baked goods that you can just make in the Dutch oven itself. I've done cornbread, biscuits, and other things where you just put in the Dutch oven. You don't have to have an extra pan. But if you're wanting to have, something smaller, or maybe you've got a couple, skinnier bread pans, most of these would fit two bread pans if you're trying to do something like that. Also, you can make two dishes at the same time. So an example would be if you're making meatloaf and potatoes, then you could do that inside your Dutch oven. Although if you are doing two dishes, you want to make sure that they have similar heat and similar time, because you don't want to have to stop the cooking to take one out and then let the other one keep cooking, because then that's going to, again, take a lot longer because you're going to let so much heat out when you open the lid. So if you are going to be cooking with a metal pan inside of your Dutch oven, then you want to put down a trivet. If you don't have that, just a couple rocks are good. You just want to make sure they're about the same size so that your pan isn't lopsided and you end up with kind of a funky looking baked good. But this is one of the many ways you can use your Dutch oven. Another thing you can do is you can use it on a tripod. So I chose this photo here to show that they have it on the tripod over the hot coals. If you are just starting your fire and there's lots of flames going, then you don't want to put your Dutch oven on yet, because too many flames, too much heat can hurt your Dutch oven. So if you have some smaller flames, you can still use your Dutch oven. Just you want to make sure you don't get it too close to that heat source. And this is great for things like soups or stews, or if you're reheating some food. So when you're first getting started, you're going to have your Dutch oven lower and closer to that heat source. But then as it starts to heat up, then you're going to want to lift it up. So like you can see here on this tripod, there's a chain, so you can easily adjust the height of your Dutch oven compared to the fire and the heat source. So just make sure that whatever you are using, if you're doing a tripod, that you can adjust that height so you're not, burning your food, overheating, and causing damage to the oven. Um, you can also use a Dutch oven on a propane stove. So let's say you're out camping and you have a propane stove, then you can use your Dutch oven. And it's just like if you were cooking with a cast iron dish on top of your stovetop. So you would follow a lot of those same similar types of cooking. If you're doing something that you need that hot, high heat, you can use your high flame for searing meat. Maybe if you're sauteing something, and then you want to use that medium flame if you're reheating or cooking. For a lot of foods, you're going to want that medium, because if you are having it too hot, then the outside might get done and the inside's still raw. So again, use it just like you would with your stovetop. If you're doing stews or roasts or other dishes that take a little bit longer, you're going to want to use that lower flame. But again, just make sure you're not getting that flame too hot that it's going to warp your Dutch oven, because propane stoves can get very warm. So do take some caution with that. All right, so as I mentioned, we were going to focus mainly on kind of the traditional method of having briquettes on the top and the bottom. So this is a temperature guideline, and this was with the resources that came out in the email, I believe, at end of last week. However, we will also send these handouts again with the recap email in case you didn't get it. So I really like this table because it shows you what size of oven you have, and then to estimate what temperature you need that to be, it shows how many briquettes. So for example, today our recipe, we're using a 14-inch Dutch oven for our Sprite chicken. We need it to be about 350 degrees. So if we go down, it shows we need a total of 32 briquettes. So we are going to need 21 on top and 11 on the bottom. So that's kind of how you read this chart. And what's really nice about this temperature guideline is then that makes it so you're able to take any recipe out of your normal cookbook, whether it's, Betty Crocker, Better Homes and Gardens, or if America's Test Kitchen, or if you're just looking up recipes online. You can take your family favorites that you make at home and adapt them to make in a Dutch oven. You just need to have a chart like this so that you can make sure that you're having the right number of briquettes going and that you place them properly on your Dutch oven. So when you purchase a Dutch oven today, pretty much most Dutch ovens on the market come already pre-seasoned. That means they're pretty much ready to go. But just like when you purchase any other new piece of kitchen equipment, you do want to make sure that you wash it and take care of it. So when you are using a Dutch oven, you can wash it with hot water and use a dish soap such as Dawn. I know when you're looking at some different care guides for a Dutch oven, it's going to say don't ever use soap. And why it says that is because when Dutch ovens were first invented, our soap we used contained lye, and lye would eat away at that iron in the Dutch oven and could ruin it. But now that we have some gentle cleaners like Dawn dish soap, other similar dish soaps, you can use that to clean. Um, if you do have some stuck on food, you can take like a rubber scraper or something. You don't want to take anything too abrasive or aggressive that could hurt your Dutch oven. But definitely you do want to wash that well and then dry it really, really well. Dry the inside and the outside with some towels, paper towels, whatever you have on hand. You don't want to leave moisture on the outside. A Dutch oven can begin to rust very quickly. So once you've thoroughly dried it, then you can lightly oil it with food grade oil. And it kind of depends on your preference at that point. Some people like vegetable oil, some people like food grade mineral oil, or if you just have some basic cooking spray. You don't want to use a spray that has added flour or any of those extra ingredients, but just the plain cooking spray with nothing else can be used. And then once you've oiled that, you do want to take a paper towel and make sure that you are getting rid of any excess oil. If there are big chunks of oil on there, when you do use your Dutch oven, it can actually harden on there. And while your Dutch oven will still work fine, it's not going to look super pretty. And just remember that this is the care you're going to want to do every time you use your Dutch oven. So after each use, you want to clean it as soon as possible, wash it, get rid of any food particles, and then always reapply that thin coat of oil with a paper towel and then get off any excess oil. If you are cooking something that's kind of messy or you don't want to deal with as much dishwashing, they do make Dutch oven liners that you can purchase. Or you can just use aluminum foil to line the inside of your Dutch oven to really kind of make cleanup easier, have less mess. One note though, if you are using Dutch oven liners, most often they are tall enough that they're not going to allow for your lid to sit on top of your Dutch oven completely and not let air and heat escape. So quite often you need to, when you take your liner, you're going to have to roll that top down a little bit to inside of the liner so that you have a nice snug fit on your lid. Also, never use cold water on a hot Dutch oven. It can warp that iron and ruin it. So always let it cool down quite a bit before you begin washing it. And do wash with that hot or warm water. So once you've used your Dutch oven, you've washed it, you've oiled it, what do you do with it? You want to store it in a cool and very dry place. You want to make sure that you're storing it with the lid ajar. So what I do is I do put the lid on it, but then I roll up either a washcloth or some paper towels and kind of have it so that it's in between the pot and the lid. That way air can circulate. That way, if there is any moisture, it's going to circulate around there. But also because you are putting oil on your pot, if you don't let air circulate, and it's going to be a little bit until you use your Dutch oven again, that oil can turn rancid and kind of cause some off smells, off flavors that aren't going to be very desirable. So let's say you're storing your Dutch oven. Unfortunately, there was some moisture in the air and you see a little bit of rust. This is common, so you just want to clean off the rust as best you can. Sometimes it'll wipe off. If you need to use a little bit of vinegar, you can. Just make sure that as soon as you have cleaned off that rust with that little bit of vinegar or vinegar water solution, you need to wash it immediately because that vinegar can then eat into the iron and cause some issues. But so once you've cleaned off that rust, you want to re-season it. So wash it well, apply a thin coat of oil, and then you can heat it to 300 degrees for 60 minutes, cool it down overnight, and then rub it again with a light coating of oil. If you do have major rust or major issues with your Dutch oven, you can completely strip it and then do a full seasoning process on that. We're not going to go into that today. If that's something you have questions about, I can definitely get you some instructions for that. But that is a pretty big task. So if you can just take the best care of your Dutch oven that you can, that's what we recommend. And then remember, your Dutch ovens, they are breakable. So you want to be very careful not to drop them, and they are very heavy. So don't be storing them up high where someone has the potential to get hurt trying to pull it off that shelf. Store it waist height or lower, somewhere that it's easy to get, that you're not going to get hurt trying to retrieve that out of your storage. And safety. While Dutch oven cooking is a lot of fun, there's definitely some safety components that you want to keep in mind. So always when you're cooking outside, cook in a traffic-free area. If you're going to be at a family gathering or have lots of people around, make sure you're not doing it where a lot of people are going to be walking. And stay away from shrubs, dried grass, other things that could potentially start a fire. Always wear closed-toed shoes. That way, if any coals do drop or something else happens, you accidentally kick the Dutch oven, that you are not going to be hurting your feet. Use those oven mitts or leather gloves to protect your hands from the heat. Always secure your hair and loose clothing. You don't want them, getting uh, first of all, getting in the food or getting stuck on something, getting stuck in between the lid and the pot, anything like that. Um, Open lids away from you. We want to prevent steam burns at all times. If you are using your Dutch oven to fry something or there's oil in there, you want to watch it closely because that can catch on fire just like with your stovetop. And then charcoal briquettes always need to be started and cooked with outdoors. They do produce some chemicals that could make you sick. Also, they're just a fire hazard. And as always, we want to keep food safety in mind. If you are cooking with your Dutch oven outside, you're taking it camping, make sure that you have coolers and ice to keep your foods cold and out of the danger zone until you're ready to cook. Also, if you're using this out away from your home or somewhere that's easily accessible to store those leftovers, I only recommend cooking the amount you plan to consume. And if you're going to be cooking more, make sure that you have adequate ice to cool it down within a short period of time. Make sure that you are preventing bacteria and other foodborne illnesses by washing your hands, washing your cooking accessories, all your surfaces. As best you can, keep the raw and cooked foods separate because you don't want any of that raw food, especially meats or anything, contaminating your ready-to-eat foods. And then use a food thermometer to check your meats and other foods to make sure that they're thoroughly cooked. All right, so now we're going to be doing our demonstration. So if any of you have ever cooked outside with a Dutch oven, you know it's not a very speedy process. And unfortunately, it's not something that I can do live during this 1 hour class. So last week I did make Dutch oven Sprite chicken, and I had a helper here in the office film it, and we cut it into little sections so that we didn't have to try to do the whole 1 hour, hour and a half long cooking session. And so you can just kind of see the highlights and really see the important parts of this. So I do want to put out there that I do apologize. Neither myself or Alicia, my helper, are professional videographers. So we edited it the best we can. And there are a few parts of it that the sound and the video are slightly out of sync, but it's close enough that hopefully it doesn't cause too much of a hassle. So first, I have it cut up into some different little sections of video. So our first one is going to be starting the briquettes for cooking.
Okay. So as we've already talked about, the first step to cooking in a Dutch oven is you need to get your charcoal briquettes going so that they can heat your dish when you've got it all prepared in your Dutch oven. So today we're just using a charcoal chimney. You can pick these up at a lot of different retailers. So what you do at the bottom is you take just regular newspaper and crumple it up, and I've already done that. And then in the top, you pour in your charcoal briquettes. Today, I'm using Kingsford charcoal. There's a lot of different brands out there. Just be careful with what kind you get. Make sure that they are a high quality brand. You don't want one that's going to burn through so fast that you have to keep replacing your briquettes multiple times while you're cooking. It is a little windy today, so we may need to replace some of our briquettes. So that's why I made sure I have some extra briquettes in here. And so to get it started, you just want to take your lighter, and I'm doing it here on this grill today to get it started. There's no reason you couldn't do it down here on this gravel. You do want to make sure you do it on dirt, gravel, somewhere that it's not close to any vegetation that you might start a fire. So you just start the paper in a couple different areas. And of course, like I mentioned, it's a little windy, so it is a little harder than sometimes to get this going. And then once you've got your flame going, it'll take a few minutes. It might take, 15, 20 minutes. It depends a little bit on how fast your newspaper lights and the conditions. And so in a little bit, I will show you what it looks like when your briquettes are ready to use.
All right, so that is showing you how to start the briquettes. So it did actually end up taking us about 25 or 30 minutes for the briquettes to fully get lighted and hot. We did actually also in between these videos, we did pull the grill off to the side so it was protected from the wind somewhat by the shed to help those briquettes get lit faster. So now the briquettes are done, and we'll watch this section.
All right, so now our briquettes are ready to go. So as you can see, they are fairly ashy. So that's how we know that they are ready to start using. So our first step is we are going to saute our bacon. So to do that, I'm going to just dump some briquettes kind of on the ground. And I'm going to spread them out. So you do want some nice long-handled tongs to do this. So I'm going to spread them out a little bit. Later on when we do our actual cooking, we will count and get precise numbers. But this right now, we just want a hot heat coming from the briquettes to saute our bacon. So we're going to grab our Dutch oven, put it right over those briquettes, and then we're going to grab the bacon. And this is sauteing just like you would on your stove. And we're going to just put that bacon in. I'm going to spread it out kind of thin. And then to help the heat stay in, I am going to put the lid back on. Although that's just to help trap some of that heat to help it saute faster. I will be putting briquettes on the lid later, but when it's time to actually cook. But right now, we're just putting that in, like I said, to trap the heat.
All right, so with the power of pre-planning and videoing, we're going to skip ahead, and our bacon should be about done.
Would you like to answer questions?
Let's get through the demo. There's 3 more little sections, and then we'll do polls and then questions. Does that sound good? All right.
So as your bacon is sauteing, every couple minutes, you want to make sure that you check it and stir it like you would if you were sauteing on your stovetop. So to remove the lid, you want to make sure you have a lid lifter of some kind. I like this one because when I grasp it like this, it pulls it tight. And then I set it down here on my trivet to make sure that I'm not putting it on the dirty ground. And then I'm going to just stir my bacon like I would any other time I was sauteing. It's starting to get a little bit crispy. It looks like it's going to need just a couple more minutes to get that nice kind of golden color that we all prefer when we are going to eat that bacon. So I'm going to put my lid back on to help trap some of that heat so that my bacon cooks faster. Our bacon is done crisping. So what we're going to do is, following the recipe, is we are going to remove the bacon. So then next we can use that bacon grease to cook, fry up our chicken that's going to be part of our Sprite chicken recipe. So now that my bacon is all removed from the pan, I am going to add in my floured and seasoned chicken breasts that have been cut into chunks. And we're going to cook those a little bit too, just till they're kind of brown on the outside. So I'm going to stick this in here, and then I'm going to do the same thing as we did earlier, and I'm going to put the lid on to help trap that heat. All right, I think it's been long enough that we can check our chicken. I've stirred it a few times, and let's see. Oh, it's got a nice kind of golden brown color on the outside. So we are going to add it to just set aside with our bacon, and then we'll be adding our vegetables. set aside, we can put in our vegetables. And so we have we're going to add in our carrots and our onions. And then I'll grab our other two ingredients. We also have potatoes. So I'm going to kind of mix it up a little bit. Then we can add back our chicken and our bacon. Because while our chicken is browned on the outside, it's not fully cooked yet. And then we're going to kind of smooth it out to get it in somewhat of a uniform layer. And now's the part where it gets its name, and we're going to add some Sprite. And we're just going to pour it over the top. This is going to add some flavor, but also provide some moisture to help it be nice and juicy when we're all done. And then I'm going to put our lid back on. So now that we want to be baking it at 350 degrees, we need to make sure we have the right number of briquettes above and below our Dutch oven. So that means we need 11 on the top and 11 on the bottom. So we are going to see how many we have and then put our Dutch oven back on it. And then we'll add some to the top. So I'm going to spread them out a little bit. And it's luckily a nice warm day here in North Idaho, so these briquettes have actually stayed pretty well. So there, I've got pretty close. I'm just going to add one or two more. Then I'm going to put my Dutch oven back on top of it. And then I want to put 11 briquettes on the top, and I want to spread them out, pretty evenly, because this is your oven and you want it to cook. If you have too many briquettes in one spot, then it can create a hot spot and your food can burn and it won't cook quite as evenly as you would like. All right, so now that our briquettes are on our oven lid, we are going to set our timer. So even though our recipe needs to cook for, I believe, 45 minutes, let me double check. Yes, for 45 minutes, I'm going to set a timer for 15 minutes. And in 15 minutes, I'm going to come out here and I'm going to pick up my Dutch oven and I'm going to turn it in 1/4 turn the one way, and then in the same direction turn the lid another 1/4 turn. That way I'm making sure I'm having more even cooking, and if there are any hot spots, then I won't have anything burn.
Okay, so I do want to mention that I did make a little mistake. I accidentally said we needed to put 11 briquettes on top. It's actually 21. So I realized a little later I did say the wrong number. So at one point I did add some more briquettes. But one thing that did make it nice is luckily with this dish we weren't baking, so it didn't have to be at the exact same temperature. There's a little more leeway because this is like more of a casserole type dish than if I was making, let's say, a bread. But also because it was a nice warm day in the 70s, it really did hold that heat nicely. If I had been cooking outside in 40 degrees, then starting out with a few less briquettes might have made the cooking process take longer. So I do apologize that there's that mistake here, although in the recipe card that you get, it does have that correct number of. So here is the final section of our demo.
My 15-minute timer has gone off. So now I need to rotate my Dutch oven. So I'm going to grab the handle and rotate the bottom for a quarter turn like that. And then I'm going to take my lid lifter and as best as I can without lifting it up, I'm going to turn it another quarter of a turn in the same direction. So that way, if I have any hot spots, that heat is being distributed. And then also, if you may have noticed that my briquettes are now over here. So why I moved them is because earlier when they were on this side, the wind was coming from this way. And when I was sauteing my bacon, some of the ashes were trying to get into my dish, and I didn't want that to happen. So that's why I was very careful to move it over here. So that's another reason why, too, when you are turning everything, you want to make sure that you keep it as close to closed as possible. One, so you don't get any ashes in there, but two, to keep all that heat trapped. So I'm going to set my timer for another 15 minutes, and then I will do another quarter turn. Okay, so it's been about 45 minutes. So now we are going to check it, and other than turning it, I haven't touched it at all these last 45 minutes. And also I didn't open the lid because it's just like when you open your oven, you let so much heat out, it's going to take a long time for your things to get done. Oh, it's looking pretty good. So it looks cooked, but we know just by looking at something, we don't know if it's truly cooked. So I have a food thermometer, and I'm going to check my chicken to make sure it's reached that minimal internal temperature of 165 degrees. So I'm going to stab a couple of the big chunks. Yeah, that one read 180. That one's in the 190s. Yes, all of our chicken is definitely over that minimum 165. So I wish you could be here with us, but now we are going to get to enjoy this wonderful dish of Sprite chicken. So now that our chicken is done, I'm going to let our lid just sit here and let those briquettes kind of finish cooling down. And then when it's fairly cool, I'm going to then put all of my briquettes, what's left of them, in this metal bucket. And I'm going to put it somewhere out of the way that if anything does catch on fire again or start getting really hot, nothing will catch on fire. And then once it is cooled overnight, then tomorrow I'm going to dispose of all the ashes. So just make sure that you aren't dumping your briquettes somewhere that they could inadvertently start a fire. So a metal bucket like this is a great option. If you don't have that, if you have a grill, you could dump your briquettes into your grill and let them finish cooling down that way, and then dump your ashes. So remember, Dutch oven cooking is a lot of fun, but there are definitely some safety things we always need to keep in the back of our minds.
All right, there are some additional resources that beyond what I sent out that you can access. The Joey's going to put the links in the chat. So Utah State University has some Dutch oven. Idaho, I did help write a 4-H curriculum, but while it is a 4-H curriculum, it still has a lot of great basic knowledge for anyone, and those are available to download on the website. So those are options as well. So before we get into questions, Joey is going to launch our final poll. All right, so it's just a couple quick questions. The first question is, after today, do you plan to attend future extension classes? Hopefully you enjoyed today's lesson, but let us know your thoughts on that. And then after today, do you plan to try using a Dutch oven? It's definitely something I enjoy. And while cooking in a Dutch oven by myself is fun, I always think it's more fun to do it with friends or family. And no, I don't cook in a Dutch oven all the time, outside with briquettes. But it is something I like to do on special occasions, definitely during the spring or summer or fall. You can do it in the winter, although it is a little bit harder. It can take a lot longer, and you do definitely have to prepare more briquettes to successfully cook when it's winter outside. And you want to have a little bit better place for the wind, trying to stay out of the snow, some of those things. So it looks like most of you have answered the poll, so thank you so much for doing that. And um, all right, we can get to questions now.
So Amy, one of the questions that was put in our question and answer section was from Eileen, and she asked, I received my grandmother's Wagner Dutch oven. It has a glass lid. Can you comment on that?
So if it has a glass lid, you could still I'd have to see it to make sure it was in good condition. You could still use it for if you're just doing heat sources on the bottom, like when I was sauteing the bacon. You could definitely use it on your camp stove, things like that. Although because it's a glass top, you couldn't cook with it with coals on the lid. I would be concerned about ruining the glass. Um, but also, depending on how old that Wagner is, it's a pretty special piece of history. So it might be something more that you just use as a display item rather than actually cooking in it. And also with it being that old, you do want to make sure it still has a good season so that if you are planning to cook, um, then it will work effectively for you.
Thanks, Amy. Lena had a kind of a couple of questions. She asks, how do you know you're getting good briquettes?
Um, Honestly, for something like that, I look for a brand I know. If it's a new brand I'm unfamiliar with, I just go online and I look at reviews. Um, Although if you're purchasing them at a hardware store or, somewhere like Home Depot, North 40, there's lots of different, Walmart. Um, if there is someone working in that part of the store, I would ask them their opinion. But if there isn't someone to answer those questions, do a little research on your own because there are some different charcoals. Also look to see where it's made. Depending on what country it's made, some things might be a little higher quality. Um, but again, just looking at those reviews, a lot of people are pretty honest online with some different reviews for products.
Lena has a couple more questions. She says, it seems like when I go to events with Dutch oven cooking, it's always underdone or takes a lot longer than it is supposed to. Is that the amount of briquettes problem, or something else? What's the best way to know you're achieving the temperature?
So one is again, like we mentioned, definitely making sure you've got the right kind of briquettes, making sure you're reading the recipe properly, make sure if it did say 21 and you accidentally thought 11, make sure you correct that as soon as possible. The outdoor temperature does make a big difference too. And you can actually, to check the heat, you can buy, kind of thermal guns, that kind of have like a temp gun that you can use that can give you a fairly accurate temperature. But the biggest thing is making sure that you are protecting your pots from the wind as much as possible and getting those good quality briquettes and counting that you have the right amount. Um, Also, one thing I've run into when I'm teaching classes that if people, every 15 minutes when we're turning it, that people get excited and they want to lift the lid and look at their food. But then they're letting out all of that heat and it's adding minutes to your recipe. So it's just like we say, don't open your oven door when you're baking or cooking. don't open your Dutch oven lid. So making sure that the lid stays on and doesn't get lifted is really key to making sure that you are getting your food cooked in that proper time.
And that kind of goes along with Lena's last question, which she asks if you can use the probe style thermometers to handle Dutch oven heat. So you put the probe in, it has the wire out to the controller in that. Or do you think it would let out too much heat to use one of those?
You could probably use one because most of those have a pretty thin wire because a lot of them are designed to be used in an oven. So just as long as it's thin enough that it's not opening the lid too much, then you could probably use that.
I think that's the end of our questions, Amy. Does anyone else? Oh, wait, we might have another one. So Lori asks, she says she has a Luxor Dutch oven that belonged to her great grandmother. Is that a brand that anyone's familiar with? Is it older, or is that a newer brand?
So a Luxor it's a brand I'm not familiar with, but at the turn of the century, late 1800s, there were a lot of different manufacturers making Dutch ovens. But then there were also some companies that were manufacturing Dutch ovens, but then they put on the Sears brand and other companies' brands, even though it was all designed the same. So there are some people that have done a lot of research on vintage Dutch ovens. So there's some different websites, some Facebook groups that they would be able to better answer that question. But and down now we're kind of down to just a few main companies, but yes, there was some times where there was a lot of different brands out there. So like I said, I'm not familiar with that one, but it might be a great brand. I'm just not sure.
And I think Serene would like to answer that question.
No, I don't know. Oh,
Sorry, Serene. I'm not. Um,
but also if you want to here I'll go to this final slide. If you want to send me an email, I can try to help answer your question too about that brand. Um, but we can wait a little bit longer, see if there's any more questions. But before I do that, I want to remind everyone to please take the survey following today's class. Joey just popped that into the chat. There is a password, so just DISH is the password to get into that survey. And if you take that survey, you'll be entered into a drawing to win a Dutch oven cookbook. And our two previous classes, I'm going to announce our winners for that. So our first week, we had the prize was sausage casing and recipe seasoning, and our winner is Cindy Adams. And for week 2, our prize was a water bottle and a stainless steel snacking kit, and the winner of that is Carol Carter. So we will work to get those items to you. The presenters will be reaching out directly to those winners to find out the best way to get you those items. So unless we have any more questions, it looks like we are going to end right on time today. But if you think of other questions later on, feel free to, shoot me an email and we can try to answer those as best we can. So we look forward to seeing you next week at Get the Dish. And our next week's session is family-friendly snacks. So have a great rest of your day, and we will see you soon.